Good morning. Merry Christmas to everybody. Got a little bit of a different angle today. Trying something new. I got a new toy, so I wanted to see how it worked. More than likely the battery will run out, and that'll be all she wrote. Um, Recording this on Christmas. I didn't have much else to do and figured why not. Had a couple reminders, which I appreciate. Hey, man. You sure you want to stream on Saturday the 25th? So, yeah, got nothing going on. And if you have been here before, what's up, Jim? Good morning. And if you have been here before, there's probably not much of a difference. So I'm trying out a new camera here, but I don't have a battery, or DC. So I have it on order, which means that the battery will probably run out, I don't know, maybe in a half hour, who knows. And then I'll switch over to a different camera. Hopefully I'll realize, because the video should go dead, but let me pull up my notes and see what I had in mind today. Yeah, believe it or not, I might have notes. Sometimes. Let's see. They're not as thorough as I wanted them to be. Some 2022 predictions. Not very good at prognosticating. And then I've got another topic that I want to talk about, which is running a 1-hour session game, which I had some feedback on Discord, and mostly Discord. Thanks for everybody that contributed to that. If you're not, I use the Gaming MBS Discord. So if you are interested in joining, head over to gamingmbs.com/Discord. That'll get you there. It's a great community. Jim in the chat is a member, distinguished member. Jim, you get anything special for the holiday? Did Santa bring what you wanted? Let's see. So, 2022, I had the company to watch, changes in format, like RPG play, RPGs to look forward to, what could probably happen in 2022, who knows. I will say company to watch. Not sure if it's the company to watch. Free League is a personal favorite. Biased. We have a lot of fans of Free League in the community. Put out great product. I don't read a lot of articles on, and this could be just because, comparatively speaking, all the games of Free League combined may not add up to the number of D&D players. I don't know. So that may lead to hey, Gabe. There's the distinguished member as well, lurking in the weeds and chimes up. Good morning. So I don't know if they would be the company to watch. They've definitely had their share of products. And I guess what I'm going back to with D&D and the popularity contest, you'll have a certain group that will certainly express their opinions of D&D. Even though it's the big 500-pound gorilla, they'll still find ways to think of things that they don't like about it. With Free League, I don't find that as prevalent. Baby registry. I didn't know Jim was getting baby. Congratulations, man. That's fantastic. Is this your first child, Jim? Hey, Quincy. Oh, I see you in there. Good to see you. Morning. Quincy's in the Discord. So, Free League, I don't see. So I bring this up because Free League has the Mutant Year Zero engine in majority of their games, except for Symbaroum, as far as I know. And each game that does have the MZ engine, they do tweak it for the feel of the specific game. So if you take Forbidden Lands and compare that to Alien and compare that to, Vaesen, there's just a bit of a tweak between them all. And I don't read a lot of articles that say, Mutant Year Zero, MYZE? Yeah. Mutant Year Zero engine is a terrible mechanic. Like, it doesn't make sense or it's broken. I don't know if a lot of people love it as much as some other systems. Who knows? But first child due in April. Congratulations to you and the missus. That's fantastic. So I don't know if it's the company to watch, because they've got some pretty decent intellectual property that they've been licensing. On Tor 2E is different as well. Okay, good to know. So they've got some outliers that don't follow the Mutant Year Zero engine D6 pool mechanics. Even the Twilight 2000 seems similar but quite deviated. So for those that familiar with the Mutant Year Zero engine, it's usually 4 main traits to your character, which seems to be pretty standard across them. Most of the systems, the points in those will range from 1 to 6, but rarely 6. Usually 4 or 5 is the max. Those are the number of D6s that you get when you do a check using that ability. There are skills that also align with some of those abilities. So say, for example, melee is a skill. Melee would fall under the strength ability. So you would take the number from both. So if you have a 3 in strength and a 2 in melee, it's a 5, give you 5 D6s. You roll those D6s, and anything that comes up 6 is a success. I'll kind of stop there because in some games it kind of deviates from there. In Twilight 2000, what they do is they use an ABCD rating in each ability and in each skill, which is, I don't know if that's good or bad, because then you have to convert that to a die type. So A is a D12, I believe. B is a D10. C is a D8. D is a D6. Same type of deal, but you're usually then only rolling the die type. It's not a pool. So if you have same situation, strength is, say, a B. So you roll a D10, and then your melee is, say, a D, and that would be a D6. You would roll both, and then any results of, I believe, 6 or higher, you would succeed. You're welcome. Regardless, going back to, are they the company to watch? They're definitely a higher tier company than some that are out there. They've probably lapped quite a few that have been around probably longer. I don't know how long Free League has been around. And I should probably qualify that as well. Even though I may not know that they've been around as long as they have. Because Mutant Year Zero could have been around for years, but it's only up until recently, I think they've hit a real big curve and spike in knowing who they are. Tales from the Loop probably started that off a little bit, but still, I don't think Tales from the Loop was as popular as like Alien is now. Forbidden Lands has gotten a lot of plugs, and Vaesen, a lot of people are loving Vaesen. They've got a few successful Kickstarters for sure. Many of their Kickstarters have been very successful. $500,000 plus, and probably a few actually. So I don't know if they're really one to actually look at for 2022. They're going to be coming out with Blade Runner. So they put out decent product for, their product is built well. In other words, they put out books that are bound well. They have a certain trade dress, if you will. They're not going to the cheap printers. And the only beef that I've had with them specifically is just their logistics. So hopefully they can maybe get that under wraps in 2022. Which might be tricky given the current logistical issues in and around the world. I don't know who else I would put on that list, and that's just my own ignorance. It doesn't mean that there isn't a company that's out there that's doing some really interesting things and maybe flying under the radar. Many of the games that I personally play seem to be in a relatively decent spotlight, right? Every once in a while, I'll get an independent published game that's small form factor. A Time to Kill, I did an actual play. It's a solo RPG. One individual. I don't know how many they've sold, but obviously very small operation. Morning, Roger. Saw you sneak in. Hey, VC. See you in the Discord. But having said that, I think we can all kind of determine some of the bigger players in the hobby. You've got obviously WotC, Paizo, Chaosium, selling some pretty decent amount of copies of their flagship games, D&D, Pathfinder, and Call of Cthulhu, respectively. Free League is probably... It would be interesting to rank some of those companies and know some of their revenue numbers, which we probably won't know for many of them because there's only one that's public and has to report on their numbers, and that's Wizards. And that hasn't, they've only started that this year, I think, right? They became a division of Hasbro, because even before that, they didn't have to report their numbers. Hey, Larry. Morning. Merry Christmas, everybody, by the way. That should go without saying, but nonetheless, either you're like me and the day's festivities aren't kicking off for a little while. You can get away, and you chose not to sleep in. But having said that, the numbers, going back to kind of ranking the companies, Chaosium is an interesting one. They do, what do they have? RuneQuest. They've got, I think Chris Spivey's new book is done under Chaosium. Call of Cthulhu is pretty big and it's growing. And it's been around for years and years and years. But when I think of Chaosium, I think of Call of Cthulhu. Quincy, hey, bopped over to the chat. Good to see you. So you think of Chaosium, you think of Call of Cthulhu. And you probably, they say that they're bigger. Was it that article that we quoted off of some, I don't know, it's Polygon or comicbook.com or something, where they said that Call of Cthulhu's bigger. Is it bigger outside the US? It's bigger. Is it bigger? And it's bigger in Japan. Which only makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy games that probably aren't very known or popular in Japan, given a lot of medieval fantasy games being based on European, tropes and history, which may not resonate with the folks of Japan. And so then, of course, you have medieval fantasy that's falling in line with more of Europe and America. Going back to that, though, so if you take all the games that Free League has put together in sales, what does that look like comparatively speaking? Are they in line? Have they surpassed Chaosium in size? And I say size as in revenue generation, not as in like amount of people or anything like largeness of the company. It's not to say that Chaosium doesn't have their own other products, but I just don't know if they do as well. Paizo with Pathfinder, there's a lot of eggs in one basket, which I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't know if that's good or bad, right? So if you have Paizo, whose flagship game is Pathfinder, they do have Starfinder. Don't want to let that slip. So they do have Starfinder. I got to think that the difference between Starfinder and Pathfinder have got to be pretty decent. Pretty wide gap. Not that Starfinder is doing poorly by any means, but I got to think that a lot more people are playing Pathfinder. Again, this is all speculation and has absolutely no scientific numbers or metrics behind it. It's just based on popularity and how long it's been around and probably past trends, right? Like we talk about fantasy role-playing games or even just role-playing games, what stands out to you, Starfinder or Pathfinder? But, you've got, if you dedicate all the resources into a specific game, like even Wizards has Magic, so that's a little unique because their Magic probably carries the company by quite a bit. But when you look at the role-playing game side, they don't need to diversify. D&D is the thing. Which it's very, when you contemplate kind of the model of the industry as far as money is made, and you think about D&D as it's from its roots. I might be losing my camera pretty soon. Is it already? No, I heard a ding. So if it does, I got a backup camera. It should just pop over. But if you think about Wizards of the Coast, TSR, the history of D&D, and its legacy, and how that's moved over to the current day with 5th edition, and how it's bigger than it ever has been. The decision on making splat books or supplements, where in the past they used to do many more box sets, they were less profitable with those box sets. Some say it led to the demise of the company because they didn't actually track some of the costs that was involved. And they found it to be very expensive, and they had multiple lines of campaign settings that were using box sets. Regardless, with 5th edition, they've been more calculated in their release cycles and what they're actually putting out and how often. Not to fall into maybe what they experienced with 4th edition or 3rd, even 2nd. Probably had quite a huge library to keep up with. So the mentality you have to think to yourself is that they consciously made an effort, instead of putting out more, that the quality some would argue could be, the quality never dipped, even though they put out a lot. But the resources it would take to put those supplements out as frequently as they did to keep the quality up, you have to hire some pretty good people, and you probably have to hire more people. So you're probably not having a single dedicated team working on one supplement per quarter. You're maybe working on, and again, this is all speculation, and I have nothing to base this on. Just more kind of thinking about it, putting it together in my brain. And some of you might agree or not. Where D&D 5th edition, if they've used a lot of freelancers for the last couple products, like Candlekeep and Strixhaven, I think are pretty heavy. And frankly, they've been using kind of outsourced resources to come up with many of the things that they've put out, right? Even from the beginning. So 5th edition, great. Put out the core 3 books. And then the first adventure was it's the dragon. Horde of the Dragon Queen? Was that the first one? Or was it the other one? Tyranny of Dragons. I can't remember. I get them mixed up. Regardless, Wolfgang Bauer and Kobold Press was, I don't know if Kobold Press necessarily, maybe they were on the inside as credits. Horde was first. Thanks, Quincy. Horde of the Dragon Queen. But that had a huge amount of help from outside the company. So I just look at it and I think, and D&D's grown. I talked to Alex Lindsay in November, briefly, as a favor to Chris Lindsay, not Alex Lindsay. Chris Lindsay from D&D and Wizards. I talked to him in November because my buddy Alex asked me to help out GameholeCon for just a brief second. And he had mentioned that the team has grown quite a bit. And the team specifically is on the digital side. So, that may be developers, project managers, business analysts, coders, whatever. And keep in mind, and I can't remember specifics, if that were just on the D&D line or just Wizards as a whole. I want to say Wizards as a whole, because Magic still has a pretty decent size group. Plus, they are still working on, improving their online Magic product. Jim says box sets, some of them with audio CDs, multiple novel lines, splat books, hardcovers. TSR went overboard in the 90s. Indeed. So going back to kind of current day, 5th edition, and you say, well, let's run a really lean staff. So you have probably, the product owner, you've got the designers, the developers that have their specific responsibilities. So you have Mike Merles, Chris Perkins, Jeremy Crawford. You've got Greg, I think is he doing the social media? And there's a lot of people behind the scenes, right? These are just people that are either on social media. People might know of them. Chris Tulak, I think I'm sure Chris is still there. I don't know if he's heavily involved with DM's Guild and Organized Play and AL. I don't know for sure. People have come and gone, obviously. But having said that, the core staff group are going to have their responsibilities, but I don't know how much it is in product. So, for example, I thought I heard on a podcast, dang it, I wish I knew which one, where they were talking about the next D&D product. I think it was past Strixhaven, and that they were excited because Chris Perkins was going to be working on that product specifically. Which sounds to me like Chris doesn't, maybe he's at, the 100-foot view of some of those products, but I think Chris is getting in the trenches and actually writing some of the details of the next product. If that's the case, and we can go off that assumption that Chris is not in the trenches all the time on every product, which I think it's safe to say that he's not, but he has some oversight or input or, ruling power, veto power, if you will, that it's a small group working on a big product line, but they outsource to a lot of third-party resources. Okay, Candlekeep, Strixhaven. So they're going with calculated release times, dates, and frequency. So if you take that kind of as it is and how it is, how we can all just observe it, they are probably selling a butt ton of product while trying to keep that bottom line pretty lean. Not to mention the licensing components. So you got the movie, video games, comic books, Dragonlance is coming out. I have to imagine that there's something involved with Wizards. I don't know how much Wizards would get from that, but they don't have to be involved in that. Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss are going to be doing that. That'll be at best or at worst a license, right? They have DM's Guild. So what does Wizards get from that? 30% of every sale? 20? Is it 20% and then 10% goes to drive-through? Could be 50. 30 goes to Wizards, 20 goes to drive-through. I don't know. Don't quote me. Some of you guys would probably know this better than I do. That if you know that, I don't know. But it's one game, right? They're going to come on with a 6th edition or a what people might call 5.5, 6th. I don't even know if it's going to be an edition, but another release of D&D to the core game in 2024. And there's a lot of eggs in that one basket, right? If D&D, it's not going to fail necessarily, but will it be as robust as 5th edition? It's hard to say. The group that has embraced that game, I would say, is a little bit younger than myself. It might be their first role-playing game. A lot of fans of Critical Role have been exposed to that. There's kind of this weird, huge jumbo ecosystem around the 5th edition version of Dungeons and Dragons. This will be one of the first ones with the popularity as high as it is with 5th edition to get an actual change. And I think everybody said, well, every edition prior has been just as popular and big, which, I mean, comparatively speaking, okay, sure. But I don't think any of them, I mean, obviously nobody's outsold. God, was there an article that 5th edition has sold more than like 2nd, 3rd, and 4th combined? It's pretty phenomenal. So having said that, when I look at a game publisher like, you look at Green Ronin or Free League, which was kind of the original kicking off of this, having different lines, does that help a company like Free League or does it hurt them? I think it's probably safe to say that if you're smaller, if you have multiple product lines, that it's probably going to be more beneficial than it is not. Simply because you can, Vaesen, it takes off great. They're not putting out a ton of books for each one of their products either. Oh. It just changed my video. There you go. Now you guys can hear me probably. Sorry about that. Looked over to the chat. Great. Thanks, Victor. So being a smaller company, you'd think it would be more beneficial to have multiple product lines. Pretty interesting, I think, when I think about it. But having said that, going back to Free League, how many splat books are there from Tales from the Loop? It's been out for quite a while. It's been out longer than Vaesen, Symbaroum. Symbaroum's got quite a few, right? So I wonder, if you were at Free League, to be on a fly on the wall, what would some of those things look like from a discussion perspective? Like, okay, Vaesen or Symbaroum, I'd be interested to find out what is popular within Free League. Because you could look at their product lines and say, is that indicative of the popularity and the sales generation for the company? So if you said, well, Symbaroum, I think Symbaroum's probably got most of the products. Like they have the vast array of products. Forbidden Lands, not so much. I mean, they have a couple supplements. They're pretty thin. Not to say that they're bad. They're just smaller. Smaller doesn't necessarily mean anything other than printing costs, maybe. The Alien franchise, they've got Colonial Marines, the starter kit. I mean, we could bring up a lot of their product, right? Here you want to see some Inception. There we go. Free League Publishing. So if you looked at some of their games, I mean, Alien, Coriolis, Forbidden Lands, Merc Borg, Tales from Loop, it's like even Merc Borg. They put it out, but how is that? I mean, would you consider that a core game to Free League? Or is it kind of like one of those, Modifius, I think, puts out the Spy game. But I think they just may distribute it, So if you look at all these, I could tell you from a pretty safe place that of all the games they have listed here, the one that has probably the least amount of product is Twilight 2000. Just got released. It's a box set. The only other thing that you can get outside of the box set you can get Player's Guide, you can get Game Master Guide separately. But if you got the box set, you got everything you need, except maybe a GM screen. That's it. So there isn't, and this is not what I want. I was kind of hoping to go to the store. Go to the store. I own Merc Borg and didn't know it was published by Free League. Shows how much attention I pay. Well, and that's an interesting one, Jim, because the reason I bring up Merc Borg is because it was produced, I think, before Free League picked it up. I think it has to do. I could say this has got the smallest product line, right? In-house product line. But I thought one of the guys for Merc Borg might have been a Free League designer, maybe. Just did this on his own with another person. I thought there's two behind it. And then they just said, because there's a couple times Index Card RPG, right? The Master Edition, that's been picked up by Modifius. But that's not a Modifius product. It didn't originate with Modifius. I guess that's my point. Merc Borg, I don't think originated in Free League. It is not an in-house Free League project. I think somebody brought it up, came up with the idea on their own, started cranking away on it and said, we got this kind of cool thing, could maybe use some help, or maybe you guys could help us with distribution or whatever the case is. And then they sure. And then it kind of brought it in under the wings of Free League. Victor says they might have a good moneymaker with the One Ring. If they have a license to use all prior materials from Cubicle 7, they have plenty to dress up and re-release. Right. But when you start looking at their catalog, do you start seeing, the One Ring competing with Symbaroum? I mean, I don't know if you'd want your own products to compete with yourself or with each other. I understand the One Ring is different and Symbaroum is different. The One Ring, it's Tolkien. Let's face it, they're both fantasy. Forbidden Lands could argue the same thing, but even Forbidden Lands is a different game than Symbaroum, quite a bit. Like in concept and execution, they use different systems. But Symbaroum, they've got a pretty big catalog for this particular game. They've got all the adventures, the Chronicle bundle, the Davokar bundle. So that's 8 books right there. Right? 8 separate books. They're not like taking one and putting in one in each bundle. I mean, so if you're all in on Symbaroum, you're going to spend a pretty dime. And then, of course, the rest are pretty small, comparatively speaking, I believe. Like the One Ring, you're right. The One Ring is probably close to a small. Yeah, this would be something like similar to what Twilight 2000 has on their product line, right? You get the whole bundle, you get the box. So I would say like Twilight 2000 and the One Ring right now, the amount of product that they have is probably almost the exact same. Alien's grown a little bit, but not too much, right? So some of these are bundles. The biggest ones, take the Foundry modules aside. The big one is like the core rule book, the Colonial Operations Manual, and then the starter kit, Alien Destroyer of Worlds. So they got like 3 books, maybe. The starter kit. So, again, pretty conservative. Basin just had a Kickstarter, but, again, you could see kind of the trend. If you take this Basin, you took Twilight 2000 and you took the One Ring and you put them all next to each other, you're going to have a product for the dice, for the system, the Game Master's Guide, or a Game Master's Guide, the GM screen. With Basin, it doesn't even have that, but say, and then you've got the core game. Maybe even on, even Forbidden Lands, I don't know if it does have the Bitter Reach and Raven's Purge, but it doesn't have like the Crypt of the Millified Mage. It doesn't have the, I can't remember the other supplement, which is surprising, right? Because maybe they don't even put it on their site. Oh, here it is. Spire of Quetzal, they put on there. Because the Spire of Quetzal and the Crypt of the Millified Mage are like almost identical in size. They're very thin, and they have like 4 or 5 sites that are listed in there. And those sites can be, maybe, are they 10 pages each? It's hard to say. Maybe a little smaller. And they're like, this form factor, that it's not very big. It's not an 8.5 by 11, US kind of big book size. So there's a little bit more with the Forbidden Lands catalog. So I guess going back to the original thing, comparatively speaking, and the companies to look for, bringing it around full circle is it an existing company that we're all familiar with that's going to be doing some really great stuff in 2022? Or is it something that we're not familiar with that might, or there may be another company we're familiar with, but maybe it's kind of lying low and then they have something come out. Maybe that's Green Ronin or Maybe a huge Powered by the Apocalypse game comes out that just is something crazy phenomenal. I don't know. And then how does this tie into the success of a company and what the product they have? Like, I'm going to guess that if you added up all of the Forbidden Lands, Free League, it's the FL part. If you take all the Free League games and added them all up, there's probably a huge gap between that and just D&D. And we could say that with some confidence just based on some of the numbers that Roll20 might put out. Yes, it's skewed, of course, because we can only consider Roll20 because that's that platform. So you could have every person on Earth that's ever bought a Free League game not playing on Roll20, which would shatter that whole analysis to bits. But we could say that, D&D is just the behemoth. And I can't remember exactly what they're going to be coming out with in 2022 for Wizards. And they get grief all the time too, so, we'll see. Coriolis has some pretty decent size product catalog, I think. Actually, this looks smaller than I thought. The third Horizon core rulebook, 3 core rulebooks, that's crazy. So I might have everything I need from Coriolis, minus the cards and map pack or something like that. Don't have the Last Voyage of Ghazali. So anyways, what companies to watch in 2022? Could it be Tuesday Night Games with Mothership? That's a whole nother model, right? Lots and lots and lots of independent, single team, maybe it's very small, maybe 1 to 3 person team working on supplements for Mothership. They do fairly well. The one I just saw recently hit my radar was Hull Breach. Think. It's not launched yet, but this is going to be an anthology, 170 plus page hardcover anthology for Mothership. The articles, from 20 independent authors. So, I don't know how much Sean and the team get. I'm guessing Sean McCoy and the group probably doesn't. They're probably similar to Vincent McGay Baker in that they're probably just saying, hey, if you ask us to use like the core of PBTA, Powered by the Apocalypse, or the Apocalypse engine, great, thank you. But we don't want to restrict it to anybody necessarily. So, I don't think Vincent's role, he's not charging people for licensing for PBTA. And I think all he's asking for is hey, this is, just put it in the credits, rules derived from Powered by the Apocalypse by Vincent and McGay Baker. And if that's the case with Mothership, then Sean and those guys hopefully would have done well during the Kickstarter. Well, do they have any intentions to put out any more core game books for that? And I got to think that Sean's mantra, if the question is, or the answer is no, then he may be in a similar boat with Vincent and just saying, hey, I made a cool game. I want everybody to have as much fun with it as possible. And if there's other folks that want to, make stuff for it, great. And if they want to run the design and how its look and feel is so that it aligns with what kind of Mothership's about, and I could kind of give it an official, Mothership, right? This logo right here. Great. I'm happy to do that, which I think is cool and probably preserves a part of, kind of ties things together. Unlike a few Saturdays ago where we talked about Cortex Prime and that whole licensing fiasco. And I never did follow up on their clarification of that license. But you got fandom involved. So like you get something like Mothership that has $1 million plus Kickstarter. You've got Free League that does some really good work, who also allows people to do Mutant Year Zero engine work. Like they have a license where you're like, hey, I think I'm going to make, Temples and Tombs by Christopher Gray, and I'm going to be able to put the Year Zero engine powered by Mutant Year Zero engine, MZYE, whatever, on my book, and Free League's fine as long as you abide by this. I can't imagine Free League may not even be charging for it. As long as you fit into within these borders, right? And that could be just, being a good citizen. Hey, E. Armstrong, good to see you. Going to the chat. Victor says, I don't think there's compete internally, referring to Symbaroum and One Ring and Forbidden Lands. Everyone I know who buys their games buys all of them. Yeah, it's got some fanatics on Forbidden Land or Free League. Goddamn it. Gabe says, I need to read more Symbaroum because if it is to be compared to Tor, there are no PC casters in Tor. There are in Symbaroum, right? And I've read just a very minor amount. I think I started on the quick start rules just to kind of read. I mean, because you start out on the core book with Symbaroum and it's a lot of setting history, which is great. It's good stuff. Victor says they have their Kickstarter for 2 more Forbidden Lands books. Just recently, yeah, I got in on that. So one is a bestiary and one is another campaign world that kind of is on the other side of the mountains of the Ravenlands, which is the default setting that comes in the book. I got in on that, so Merry Christmas, E. Victor says the Mothership Kickstarter read like it was the tip of the iceberg for their future plans with the game. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So that's, I mean, we kind of talked about, I had that on 2022, right? It's the end of the year, essentially. I have one more, the next Saturday is going to be January. So you look back and say, hey, what did I play this year? How was it? What do you want to do in 2022? Make predictions, whatever, right? And I had some of that noted and I just didn't flesh it all out. So I just figured I would say, start with a company and what's the kind of consider in 2022. I think as we get closer to D&D's kind of end of life, 5th edition specifically, obviously, how does the product line look? Because whenever there's a new edition coming, sales is just going to start to take a freaking nosedive. Hey, Dorigo. So I don't know. Like, I don't own Strix. I haven't bought a Wizards of the Coast book since Rime of the Frost Maiden. And, yeah. And I don't have any plans to buy any other ones, honestly, anymore. They probably, I wouldn't say they've lost me as a customer, but I'm not their target base, really. But there's so much out there. So much. And what is it going to take for another company to come around that's going to be like, holy cow, we should stand up and take notice of this. Maybe it's Tuesday Night Games. We're like, Sean McCoy and the gang are kind of like, hey, we just had a huge successful Kickstarter. Mothership is like doing well. It's been out for, I just, 2018? Which seems like been longer than that. I wonder if I can even find 2018, first published in 2018. It seems like it's been out for like 10 years. I don't know why. I think I heard about somebody wanting to play it at GaryCon a long time ago. Like, yeah, I want to check out this Mothership. And it might have been like the first time it was out there roaming around. But to have the size Kickstarter that it did, like, wow, good on them. So we'll see. I don't know. Game publisher wise, what that looks like in 2022. Games that I've experienced in 2022, I played. Is it the first year that I've gone without playing 5th edition? I think it might be, honestly. Let me rephrase that. It might be the first time that 5th edition has been out and I've gone an entire year and not played it. And being active as a player or in the hobby, right? So if I take a break, I wouldn't count. Like, oh, I took a break from gaming for 2 years. Oh, I didn't play 5th edition for 2 years. Like that doesn't, I'm playing RPGs, everything but 5th edition. So what have I played? White Lies, Delta Green, Forbidden Lands, Blades in the Dark, Scum and Villainy, Conan, Gabe's Run Conan, 2D20, OSE, Low Fantasy Gaming. It's 8 different ones. What else am I missing? Alice is missing. That's 9. I wouldn't call it the solo one. Trying to think. It didn't go to any conventions, so that would rule out any convention play I'm missing. 9. And I've got a feeling like, you played in my game, you goofball. Are those the 9 games that I played? Let me think about this. I did play 5th edition. Brett ran Streets of Avalon, and it was 5th edition. One single one shot. Well, I can't say I went a year and didn't play 5th edition. Oh well. So 10 different games. I think that was it. Trying to go through my brain here. Star Wars would have been 11. Star Wars, Age of Rebellion, just lump it all in that one. So 11 different games. That's pretty good. That's a good year for me. Like I was stuck in like playing one. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I don't think so. I think that was it. So what am I going to play in 2022? And many of them were with BSers. Mothership. Did I play that in Jim? We played that like the year before, maybe. I did play Mothership though. Phil ran Mothership for us on an off night of Forbidden Lands. We were short of players, so we played Mothership. He ran The Haunting of Ipsilon. The Haunting of Ipsilon 14. 41? 14. So that would have been 12 games, 2011. 2011. What year is it? 2021? 2021. 11 games, for sure. Trying to think of what else might have slipped in there. Yeah, and a lot of different BSers, man. Like, and that's another thing too. I've probably played with more people. Cyberpunk Red, throw Cyberpunk Red in there. So what am I up to? 12 different games. That's pretty crazy for me, because usually I'll be in the doc group and what I'm running. So if I just took the doc group and what I'm running, and say the doc group runs maybe two different games, which would have been Delta Green and Cyberpunk Red this year. That was it. And then I was running Forbidden Lands. It'd be like 3. I think 3 is kind of like, pretty standard for me in the past years, minus that convention where I might get in a couple different ones. Yeah. So we got to do one of these. I think it deserves one of those. And so if I took all those and then I put down all the different players and GMs I've played with, it's a pretty vast group. Another one of these. So, Mark Borg. Forgot about Mark Borg. So what am I up to 12? 13? Better write these down. I'll have to play this back. 13. Lucky number 13. Mark Borg being number 13. Yeah. Played with Jim and Gabe, amongst others. 13. I think that's got to be it for me, right? I'm trying to think. 14. Up to 14. I played Lady Blackbird. Clever name Wayne. Ran Lady Blackbird for us. There you go. 14. There's probably another one in there somewhere else. That's a fine year. It's a mighty fine year, I would have to say. And believe it or not, this could be crazy, but I think if there wasn't a huge pandemic going around where I personally felt staying at home a lot, I don't know if I would hit that in any other year. Unless I went to a con, right? Because cons kind of throw a loop in. And when I go to a con, I don't usually want to play in the same stuff that I already know or have played in. Right? Then I'm going to start going into like, I haven't played Masks. I haven't played, The One Ring or whatever. And then I go there and play 3 games in one weekend, right? Do that a couple times a year, and half your list is, 6 different games, and you've only you knock that out in 2 weekends in the year. So yeah, good times. So the 14 I just mentioned were 2021. 2021. That's all. Pretty sure Mark Borg was this year. Oh, it all gets cloudy. So 2022. 3 games that I want to get to the table. And one is kind of, I'm starting to think about it more and more, which is Cold Shadows. I gotta get that one to the table. I've talked about it for years. There was an episode of Gaming MBS we did, which was like episode, 170 or something crazy. Like we're on 370 now. So, 52 episodes a year. We're talking a few years ago. And, it's a must. The only thing I'm trying to think of is how do I do chits using a virtual tabletop? And I don't necessarily need to use a VTT, but there's got to be a way to, when you do a risk, there's a risk pool. And you grab bits out of it and put bits back into it. Otherwise, I don't mind running Theater of the Mind. I could put the character sheets up and do that. That's not a problem. We could run dice pools. That's not a problem. It's the community chit pool that might be an issue. So I have to figure out how to do that. I could probably just make tokens and put them on a virtual tabletop and people could pull it out and put it back in, which is probably the easiest. There's nothing native out there that I know of. It's also very aspect driven. So, I would have to cobble something together, probably using something that's related to Fate. But again, is it going to be perfect? No. The tricky thing is to make it work well enough that it doesn't actually inhibit the game. And I don't know if I could do that through a VTT to facilitate some of the needs of the game. Could use decks. Yeah, somebody mentioned decks too. Like, hey, does it have a card thing? Because you could use cards for that. And Foundry does. But it's just another thing for me to tackle. So, Cold Shadows. I mentioned to Harrigan recently that I want to get some people through the Forbidden Lands piece. I think there's some people that are intrigued about it. They want to get into it. Hey, Sean's game group on Thursdays is full. I would really love to get in that. So what I would do with that is run a 3 to 6 session arc for just Forbidden Lands. Like, here's what we're going to do. Chits are really easy on Roll20. I'm sure it's the same with other VTTs. Yeah. So I think with, whoa, there goes my train of thought. Cold Shadows, Forbidden Lands. So I'll probably round up a few people to see if they're interested. Tell them it's a 3 to 6 session arc. Get them through what the journey is like, kind of what the feel of the game is like. I probably run it in the default setting and running it at the same time as the Thursday night game group. And I doubt they'll run into each other, but never know. It might be interesting. Yeah. And then maybe some combat, maybe get them through a site, give them some lore, and see if the dynamics be a little bit different. So do that, and then that'll be kind of brushed aside at some point. Because I don't know how many I would get for demand. I think Nelson was wanting to look at it. Hobbs had expressed interest. There might be a couple others. And frankly, I'd want to keep it to like 4. 4 is a good 4 or 5 tops for sure. That's kind of priority-wise, maybe not very high, but with me, who knows? What else do I want to get to the table? Twilight 2000. Gotta get this to the table for sure. This may be another, 6 session thing. I want to do a charity game. I mentioned this briefly. I want to do a charity game for that. So it might be an ongoing charity thing where it's like, hey, if you see this, head over to this place. So it might be streamed. If not streamed, it may be recorded and then put out. There is a charity Eric Salzwedel brought to my attention here in Wisconsin that is for veterans' kids, or the kids of veterans, right? The children of soldiers, airmen, Navy, shipmen, Marine Corps, what have you, etc. And what they do is it's a camp, I think. They do a camp once a year or something along those lines, and do a couple other things of events-wise. But it's for kids that have lost parents who had been veterans. And I'm like, yeah, that's, if they're a legit charity that could use some help, I'm all in on that one for sure. So I would do that. I would probably be somewhat selective on who would be a part of that. I would look at veterans as being a part of that group. Not that you would only need veterans. It's not that veterans would be the only ones that would know how to play Twilight 2000, but there's a kind of theme going on, I think. So I know Tim DeShane from Rhode Island was interested in playing. I think Roger's always interested in playing. Hoos, I think he's a veteran who's interested, might be, Salzwedel had expressed interest. So we could go, that'll be fun. So Twilight 2000, Cold Shadows, Feng Shui is another one I want to get to the table. And one that I probably know the least about, or is one of the more enigmatic games. And I say that only because I started reading Feng Shui and thought, how would I roll with this? And I've got a supplement because Atlas Games has like this new subscription model that they're trying to get off the ground. Justin Alexander's behind that. and trying to kind of get that product line going. So they put out like, hey, we're going to do this thing. And as a it's a weird subscriber because you don't like, I pay a subscription and then I always get something. It's kind of like if you sign up, they're going to tell you what they're going to release. And then you can opt to either get it in a PDF, print, or both. And if you're on the subscription list, then you kind of get a little bit of a discount. Not a ton, maybe it's 10%, 15%. Little bit helps. And then they send you. And, you know, that game can be pretty gonzo too. Like, I think one is like a Burning Man. Parallel to Burning Man in the Gobi Desert, maybe. Something happens, right? But I would have some things in my brain that I would probably want to use for that setting and system. So those are the three amongst anything else that comes up. There's some fantasy games I'd like to try. There's some flying around on our Discord, on the Gaming MBS Discord. You know, I don't know. It would be nice to get a taste of some of those that are different because I think there's still the fantasy piece is interesting. I'm intrigued by the amount of fantasy RPG talk that occurs on our Discord, only because there's so many fantasy RPGs, and it seems like where do you stop? Or where do you say, like, or what is the appeal of looking at the different ones? This is a rhetorical question, obviously, but it's, if you take them all and put them in a cauldron and you go, I just want to try all these and how they roll. How, like DCC, I mean, and there's some of the big ones. We're not talking like, you know, I can't remember them all. The smaller ones. I've got some Kickstarters that are going to be coming too, like Into the Odd. I've got the Index Card RPG Master Edition coming. I've got Cortex sitting on the shelf. So some of those are probably going to I want to probably see some time, but maybe those are ones I want to play. Like the three I mentioned are probably ones I'm going to have to initiate and get to the table. So we'll see. Dorigo says, I think I'd be up to running a Forbidden Lands game, but I don't want to learn how to do it on a virtual tabletop. I'm thinking Nexus, when it launches, combined with Albert Rodeo, is my ticket. Here's the thing about that, Dorigo. You're right. You don't need a VTT. Here is what I find helpful with Foundry. And it's not some of the things that people probably lean on for a virtual tabletop. So some of the major components for a virtual tabletop are character sheets, dice, and visuals, primarily around a map, specifically if you're dealing with fantasy or if you want to use tokens on a map or, you know, some graphical representation, right? Whether that be deck plans to a spacecraft. With Forbidden Lands, the nice thing about the oh, pardon me. One of the nice things about Forbidden Lands on Foundry specifically, because that's my experience, is that you have a journey component, right, in Forbidden Lands, which you might already know. And the nice thing about that sheet is you can just plop the token right in where everybody is. Now, you can do that at your desk or your table, right, without that, for sure. It just makes it easier. So you could, the nice thing is if you've seen it, you can model it and not come up with it in your own mind, or think about how you're going to do it outside of the virtual tabletop. The dice, like a lot of the things that Foundry does, like I'm telling you, I would say every month, because we play every other week, at least once a month or once every 2 months, if there's an update, the guys go in, they do something and realize something has changed that has been better. So, for example, encumbrance, equipment. So if they put, we had just had this happen in our game session. The group bought 2 donkeys. So I could literally assign those 2 donkeys to the party, and each donkey had a character sheet. When they equipped the donkeys, because there's a donkey monster sheet and there's a donkey player character sheet. And if you use the player character sheet, then you can take gear and put it on the donkey, and it keeps track of the gear. So it's not like, okay, we just put all this shit on the donkey because it should be able to carry it all and we write it off. No, it's like, yes, there are 12 slots. If you drag the gear on there, it'll either take up a slot, half a slot. I mean, I think I might get in the weeds a bit, but that's done. It's managed, finished. Very easy. Random rolling tables. Like if I want to roll a random chart, I click a button and it asks me what table I want to roll on. And I pick it from the drop down and then I hit roll. That's it. So it prevents me from having to go, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. And this thing's all random tables, by the way. This isn't Forbidden Lands, but it is all random tables. Okay, let's see. All right. Click. Okay, good. I should probably mark that. Keep track, So, because I don't, and this is from the game master perspective, because the player, well, to the players to some degree, but the players, like, the map, these guys have explored 6 hexes in this campaign that I'm running currently. 6 hexes, and in like 6 months, they are like not like they're like we're crappy explorers. Like, because they're going from Eden's Outpost a couple hexes, and then they come to ruins. They explore the ruins for 4 or 5 sessions, right? Then they go back to Eden's. So their map, I should show you it. I think I can bring it up. So their map is their vision and what they could see is like limited. That's it. So frankly, I could run session upon session and they would never need to look at a map. So when I talk about Forbidden Lands, you definitely can run it without a VTT very, very easily, because a lot of the things that you need, what would be at the core, and it's D6s, so people could just pick up their die pool, roll it, read the tea leaves. They don't need a VTT as much as like a Star Wars game would, in my opinion, because Star Wars Fantasy Flight Games has got the symbols on it. And trying to decipher that, just having a computer go, you have these successes and this failures, whatever, is huge. Like it just is. I'll share some insight into this quick, and then we'll go on to the next thing I kind of want to talk about, which may or not. Oh, this is fantastic. So, so I'm prepping for my BS or Con game, which is Forget About It. If you've never heard me talk about this game, it's 5 mobsters in 1968 Vegas that's taken somebody in the trunk of their car out to the desert to get rid of. We don't want to see this. So I'm importing all the stuff into this game to make, and then I could probably run this over and over too for people that are interested once I get it set up. All right. So you guys are going to laugh at like what they've explored so far. Dorigo, damn it, got to go. Open presents, damn, Christmas family get in the way. My RPG talk. Dorigo, have fun. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Enjoy. No problem. So, this is their map. This is what they know. Jim says, I don't care all that much about trying a ton of different fantasy RPG systems, but I like to play with people who want to run a bunch of different systems, so I end up trying them anyway. Yeah. Sometimes it just comes to the people like you want to play with. Doesn't matter. Like, I'll play with anything because I'm going to play with Jim. That'll be cool. Is Jim playing? Oh, count me in, right? So here is, and there's the apps for the Genesis system for sure. Yeah, so you could run it at the table, just say, hey, you got to go buy the $5 dice app for sure. And especially Star Wars, like you don't necessarily need graphical representation for that either. You just run it over Zoom and call it a day. But this is Forbidden Lands. And Dorigo's leaving, so I can't, the guy I wanted to show is, it's okay, Dorigo. But this is all they see. So the little red path is to keep track of hexes they've gone through, because if you've gone through a hex in Forbidden Lands, you don't have to roll Find Your Way or Lead the Way, right? You already kind of know your way through the woods and it's safe. You've already navigated it. It also doesn't count for XP because it's not newly explored. So you got to keep track of what hexes they've gone through somehow in Forbidden Lands, because it matters. They get XP for new hexes explored. So you could probably see kind of the fogginess. That's a weather thing. So here's kind of this is the whole map. They've gone, they've explored 4 hexes. So when I run this game, if they don't leave this hex, they don't need this map. Hey, we're going to stay at the outpost and we're going to go, this last session they saw a couple elves come into the outpost. They did some bartering. They did some training. That was it. Little role playing. So now the next session, they're going to probably take off from here. I think they're going to go and find Golgara's mentor, Druid, in the woods, to hopefully decipher a text that they have come across that another NPC has but can't read it. Neither can the party. So we'll see. So I think that I think she might be in Groveland Woods. Of course, he's going to be like, I should know where I'm going. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a tricky one. So we might put her way down here. We'll see. But yeah, you don't, other than what I mentioned, and then the character sheet always comes in handy for players because they can just literally, here's the player characters. Here's Kevin's character sheet. So if I say, hey, man, just give me a mic check, all you got to do is just click on it and roll. That's it. Where you get a character sheet, you got to look it up. Then you got to assemble the dice. Not a big deal. Here is the party sheet that I was talking about. So 4 player characters. You go to the travel tab up top. So here's the journey kind of thing. And each journey has a role, literal ROLE, right? So you have hike, lead the way, keep watch, rest, sleep, bake camp, hunt. So as you get through the hex and you come to the end of the day, you go, okay, who's doing what during this quarter? Because days are in quarters. You're like, it's the 3rd quarter. They're going to make camp. Great. Who's making camp? I'll make camp. Okay. Then you can just drag this person over to make camp. Okay. You can click on, what's making camp? It'll tell you some of the details of what making camp is, like what do you need to roll, and some of the repercussions that comes from it. I think there's even a link to the table, right? So here's keep watch. That's also associated with it. Make a survival roll modified by the quartermaster talent. So if you want to click on quartermaster, it's hyperlinked. You could read that. So it's just like, okay, make a survival roll modified by quartermaster. Okay, cool. What's quartermaster do? Oh, hold on a second. Okay, quartermaster, like it's sometimes some of these digital tools can speed things up a little bit if they're put together properly and people can navigate them in an efficient manner. So this is helpful, and you could do this at your desk for sure, but then you got to make sure you know what make camp is and what is all involved in that. Hunt, find prey, kill prey, forage, fish. Each one's kind of got their little nuances. They're all skill checks, but okay, if they don't, what if they have a talent that has to do with fishing? The player should probably know that, just like a spell, in my opinion. But nonetheless, some of these could just click on it and bring it up. So that's not to get into a huge amount of Forbidden Lands on. But anyways, there you go. Had the fog of war affected how far that group explored in FL? No. Nope. Because no, it hasn't affected them like, maybe, I don't know, not that I'm aware of. They could just simply, because I give them enough of the outlying area to go, well, there's mountains over here, right? Because they could probably see those from the hex that they're in. But the ruins, once they get into a structure and there's like a couple different rooms and there's like, there were a couple kind of golem type monsters in the ruins, guardians that they had to contend with. There was a sarcophagus. There was a secret room. So once you get into that little, you focus down deeper instead of at the 100-foot view, time tends to go a lot slower. And so, they could spend quite a bit futzing around in here. And then they kill the bandit group. I probably put a lot more into this hex than I needed to be. But nonetheless, I think it was a good time and everything was fine. And they're like, oh, we got all this shit. We should probably take it back to the outpost and trade some of it, get rid of it. Maybe, get it for stuff we actually want and need. So they do that. And, yeah. So I don't think it's the fog of war. And you could certainly go, okay, here's the map. This is what I did the first time. Here's the map. Here's where you guys are. Where do you want to go? The only problem is then they'll look across and they'll go, oh, look at, here's this thing, or there's this, there's this Weatherstone thing over here. We should go there. Let's go investigate that. And it's like, well, this is a map. It doesn't necessarily mean that exists. Right? Map is not terrain. And it became more of a, well, we should go over here. We could go over there. We can go over there. Like, they're not kind of supposed to know where they actually are. Which is a little bit of a dilemma because, well, how did they get to this spot? Like, they would have had to travel there, right? So they would have known how, so then they would have these traveled hexes. That's why I tell people when they're going to run Forbidden Lands and they haven't done it before, they're like, oh, I'm going to base them out of a town and then they can kind of go out from the town. And I'm like, dude, I would just try to get them out in the middle of nowhere because then they'll have no choice other than to go out. If you give them a town, then you start making the town a little bit more richer and they're like, oh, this town's kind of cool. We have our resources. Where if they come across the town, that's different. Then they don't know anything about the town. They don't know about anybody that lives there. There's no, well, my character would know this because I grew up here. That's all gone and out the window, which leads to more discovery and things of that nature, which I think is kind of at the core of this game, in my opinion. That's the way I want to roll it. Doesn't mean you can't, but nonetheless, hey, what's up, Phil? Dirty bugger looking at the map. Get out of here, Phil. Show you the map. Anyways, would they have gone further if they could see the whole map as players? No, Phil, there he is. Phil can ask. He's part of the group. Merry Christmas, Phil. I'm going to need to start moving into non-combat talents next. Phil's the big tank. He's the dwarven tank. He's rolling something like 10d6 for crushing people. He says, Fog of War makes things way more mysterious. Good. Perfect. As Jason Statham says in The Italian Job, perfect. If I were playing, I'd prefer Fog of War. Yeah, and this isn't too bad, right? I mean, you give them a little taste of what might be around the immediate area. I could tighten this up where like they don't see anything else. This could be very restricted. And as they go through, they could see, right? Like, oh, okay. Gives them kind of an incentive to like, hey, we need to spread this thing out a little bit. Maybe we go here. Maybe we take the long way and then we go here, and go over here. And then this kind of opens things up a little bit. They've got a lot of different avenues. I don't know about a lot. They've got a few different avenues that they could pursue. And when do they do that and how? And it's just going to grow, right? As they come across different things, different people, and different lore. They're going to have to explore. I haven't even dropped another big one on them yet, which I think is going to be interesting. And the reason is because they're in an outpost. So once they get moving, our outpost, I could get something mouse in front of them. So Phil says that's easy to hand wave away where we came from to reach Eden's outpost. For sure. If we started in a town the way we play, we'd probably still be there. Yeah. And I think I think I might have mentioned this. I did a video and it was specifically to Josh, the GM from Discord, where he was like, hey, my players aren't really jamming on Forbidden Lands. And before he came back with that news, I gave him some pointers because of what I did, I think, differently from the first time to the second time. And the first time, these guys were kind of, I think, and I don't want to speak for Phil in the group, but comparatively speaking, they didn't have a lot of stuff to sink their teeth into. So they were kind of like, okay, well, I guess we'll just go this way. Where now it's like they have to sit down and kind of make some decisions based on what they have in mind and what resources they have in front of them. Where it's not aimless exploration. Where the first one was like truly like kind of aimless, which is fine. You can go either way, but then if they don't have anything to kind of come across or motivation, then you might run into a problem with your party in which direction they want to go. Those guys are kind of following the coastline because it was like, well, we'll just follow the coast, I guess, kind of thing. Now they've got, an old man with this magical tablet, but it's only half the tablet, and he's looking for the other half. Oh, they heard the bandits talk about this place directly west, these ruins that are supposed to have these things. Each one of the player characters has a rumor themselves that is dangling, treasure or an artifact or a magical artifact in front of them. Do they pursue that? You guys tell me. All of them have their own unique backgrounds that none of the other party members know, which is another thing I thought was pretty cool because the beginning of the first go around was, well, me and this guy, Phil and Wayne's character know each other. And Harrigan and Kevin's characters know each other. And they came together, which is fine. You could do that again, of course. But with the second iteration, like they're all strangers. None of them know really what they're doing out here exploring. And they can make up whatever story they want. They could tell each other whatever they want. I know the deal. So I could take what I actually know and what is pertinent to their background and poke around, right? What are you doing out here? The NPC asks you, what are you doing out here? Do you say it? Do you relay the same story you relayed to the other 3 player characters? Or did you make up yet another story and hope one of the other player characters doesn't hear it? Does that matter? So as the campaign has kind of progressed, the feedback on some of them are, Phil will say, oh, I'd like Kevin's character, Golgara. I'd like to know more about their background. Well, that's going to be up to Golgara and Kevin and how that kind of comes out. I can present the situation where he'll have the opportunity to choose And there is like, oh, okay, right? Oh. So, Phil says, I think it's good how the edges of the explored hexes show a little bit around what's adjacent. Yeah. Can we handle more? Yeah, you can handle more. And this is the thing. These guys are becoming pretty powerful because they've been training a lot. So they'll take a quarter day, train. Didn't succeed. Take the next quarter day, train. Oh, they succeeded. They get another, level of their talent. Like I said, Phil is a big bonker. The thing is with Forbidden Lands, these guys go traveling through a hex and they run into a mishap. That's not combat based. That's like hellfire rain comes, just weather, Mother Nature comes down with a huge hammer on your guys' head. So now you're wet, you're cold condition. And if you're cold and you don't find a place to warm up, then you're going to be cold. And then cold applies certain conditions to your body and your skills, right? Your skills and abilities. So now your 10d6 die pool system down to 3d6 because you're freaking cold and freezing and you can't function. Have another mishap. Boom, something else happens. And it just piles and piles. And then all of a sudden you're out in the elements and shit. Like, if I could just, wield my axe against some beastie, I would kick ass. But what am I going to do against the weather? So these guys, probably scaring these guys into staying in one spot, which probably isn't the way to go. But, I'm not worried about Phil walking through all my encounters because Forbidden Lands will take care of that. You could start a plague in the outpost. That might get them moving either for safety or in search of a cure. That's a good one. Have somebody stumble in there with boils on their face and like they try to keep them out. Like, what do they do? Or they don't even know. Like they go in there, some rando comes in there to seek solace. That rando had an encounter with something, a couple days back. It's incubated in themselves. And then they go to the outpost, and then the next day, this, NPC wakes up and completely delirious, rage zombie throughout the outpost. Yeah, it's a good point. I'll have to write that one down. Who is it? Victor White. This idea inspired by Victor White. Lucas. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Ty, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, California. Glad you guys could join me. Just going through some things about 2022 in the beginning of the show, just kind of talking about the dynamics between different companies and D&D, 5th edition, and, Free Leagues all kind of stemmed from who would be the company to look at in 2022. And then, like many of these live streams, it just kind of goes off into the ether. Phil says, this go-around feels a little tighter than the first. Oh, for sure. Yeah, man, I learned. I'm learning. Rodelic says, my group, good to see you, Rodelic. My group likes the map being open but not filled out. Yeah, I totally agree. They use the established ruins as landmarks for exploring. They move a lot more than your group, though. Yeah, these guys will start moving because I can get them to start moving too. I could put things into motion that would allow them to make the choice on whether to move, and it could be if they don't, it's a harder thing to stay. Right, that would be the kind of goal. Like you always give your players a choice. They may not like them, but you try to give it to them. Have them weigh the situation, and they take on the odds, or they take a more challenging path, or maybe a least challenging path. Here's the thing, Rodelic. What I would do is I would be like, okay, I don't know if you did this, and you could probably help me out in answering this, but did you tell them, here's the deal, I'm going to put the map down, but that's it. Map is not terrain. So whatever you see on the map, you can go and explore. Doesn't mean it's there. So there's a couple of things there. The reason I was very reluctant to divulge the map the second time around is because I didn't want these guys to look at it and go, oh, there's ruins. There's Whaler's Hold right here. Let's go there. I didn't want them to be able to do that just based on looking at the map. If they heard about it, they know it's in that direction. Maybe there is a rudimentary map that's like, hey, it's in the northwest corner or whatever. Great. But I wanted them to kind of explore as they're getting there and not knowing if it's actually there. So did you tell your group, hey man, you could travel across the entire map that you think is going to be ruins at the end of that 8-10 hex journey and nothing's there because maps aren't accurate. The map like this thing, I mean, can you imagine throwing this map down and like when the world wasn't even fully mapped out? I mean, look at some of the old maps of the world. It's all assed up, like the West Indies and where they put stuff. And they, you know, they didn't think they were going to run into like some weird, huge continent that wasn't the West Indies in between. And then the scale is all off. Like, I think we give players too much, in my opinion, when we put maps down. It's too much. Look at this. Like here's a legend right here. 10 kilometers. Now, for the game master, sure. So I think this should be a game master map and a player map. You know, it's got the little legend here. I mean, this is the map in Forbidden Lands you're supposed to put right on the table and go, here you go. What do you guys want to do? You know, kind of like your Risk Legacy maps where you're starting to, you know, you explore, you put the stickers down, right? To me, it shouldn't have a legend because half the stuff we don't even know where it is. The scale could be totally off, you know, because back in the day, the scale was, well, beyond the bushes or beyond the mountains, and here's the mountains. Like Tolkien maps, right? Or even just a hand-drawn map like, hey, bad guys are here. Don't go here. Dragon living under the mountain. Bad news, right? X marks the spot. Well, where's X? I don't know. It's up there. Like, okay. Redell says in-person group loves putting stickers on the map where they've discovered things. Yeah, for sure. Fairly unique to that system. Yeah, cool. Phil, with all true, the elements are going to get us. Stay positive, buddy. Think your weather is going to kill him. Yeah, for sure. Mighty, mighty dwarf. Slayed 100 of the enemy, only to be killed by snow. Ty says we both had an obstacle in feet. Oh, and fate. Jim says, my group has been a tiny section of map covering what they've explored so far, and I screen shared a larger map that they glimpsed at Scribe's shop, which they didn't buy or screenshot. You know, that's a good point too. Playing virtually, I don't know if that's ever been brought up. Like, hey, I'm going to put a map down. Don't screenshot it. But I think a lot of players don't. A lot of them probably don't even think about, oh, I could have screenshot that thing. I think I've probably had a couple players like make a joke out of it. Oh, I could have totally screenshot. Oh, shoot. You know. That's all they know so far, he says. Victor says, Vincent says, make their lives not boring. Yeah, for sure. Phil says, the plague idea is solid. Just not sure I want to deal with a pandemic in my RPG at the moment. Too soon. Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting with Forbidden Lands because like part of the problem with the default setting is that there was the blood mist. So that holed everybody up. Now the blood mist is gone. It's like, yay, we're free to roam. The plague thing, Phil, I would see as more of a roaming thing. Like you want to stay away from, so you got to move. Otherwise it infests a town. Or you go to a town and it's like, you got the sign at the edge of town. You know, the plague is here. Don't go beyond this. Or move forward at your own risk. Death awaits you. I don't want to go in there. I mean, I gave you guys the cursed tower. Phil was the first guy who was like, I'm not going in there. not Forbidden Lands or a hex crawl, but there's an exploring the unknown element to the game. That's cool. That's something I think is really can really like hook the players into wanting to play that game. Because we get into these weird, like, hey, let's play. Oh, I'm going to run a game. It's going to be in the Forgotten Realms, and it's going to be Rime of the Frostmaiden, Curse of Strahd and Barovia, whatever in Eberron. And it's automatically going to be like, oh, I'm going to go out by the setting, read it. Cool. I know what how to travel and all the dynamics of the races. And, the Forbidden Lands guys they last session were like, I'm doing my damnedest not to read the Game Master book. And they all own the game. They don't want to know. They don't want to even know about the lore, which is fantastic. So the nice thing about not knowing about the lore is got that mystery about it, and they don't have to say, "Oh, Sean screwed it up." I read it. That's not how it goes. Oh, he's making it his own. Oh, I kind of wanted to be like this. And frankly, it's like, what is accurate? They've been holed up over 300 years in their houses and their little hamlets. And now they're like, I'm getting the hell out of here because I've been holed up in this thing. I think I hear a animal trouncing around upstairs. Let me double check quick because I don't want her to pee. So could be my cat, but let me double check. I'll be back in like literally just a couple seconds here. Okay, longer than a few seconds. All clear. All right. What's up, Harry? I see you in the Discord. I haven't had Discord up in a little while, so apologize. So let's see. Redel says they met another NPC going off to the gladiator arena, so they had a choice right away. They ended up exploring some of their own. Ended up a cool experience that wasn't planned. Victor says, have you ever seen the ancient travel maps of Britain? There's no scale and they are usually just horizontal flowcharts. Yeah, for sure. Phil Groms failed his empathy roll at that head collector's tower. Major fear set in. No way was he going in. Yeah, that was the cursed tower. Yep, that's right. Not knowing the lore lets you dish it out as you wish. Gives us little teasers of the truth. It's all perspective, right? I love learning lore. Makes me feel I'm more part of the game more. Yeah, don't get me wrong, Forgotten Realms, I'm a fan of Eberron. But with that comes, a certain level of knowledge. And then if you've got more knowledge, then it takes kind of away the mystery. And sometimes I think good RPGs, if you can pull off a relatively good mystery without alienating the player characters, it's good. And it's not always easy to pull off either, right? Victor says exploration is what hooked me on Isle of Dread back when it came out with D&D Expert Set. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about today that I had down, and I was going to prepare more notes for, because there's some comments and feedback that had been provided. And I'll give you guys, because you guys showed up on Christmas, and I'll give you a little bit of a little exclusive, shall we say. Brett and I Monday night are going to announce that we're canceling the show. No, I'm just kidding. We're not canceling the show, but we are going to go to every 2-week release schedule. Sorry if I put a shock into you. Some of you probably vote, oh, no big deal. We're going to go to every 2 weeks. Explanation. It's a few things. And you guys, if you guys want to tell people, that's fine. I don't really care. Brett will probably be surprised if anybody knows, because we'll probably bring it up on Monday night's show. We're still going to record the Monday coming up, as of this recording. And, we've had talks all over the place kind of in the last year. And so just when I think like Brett and I one of us seems like there's a foot out the door, the foot gets brought back into the room. So there isn't any talk of ever that we have of any intention of canceling the show or hanging it up for any long duration or indefinite time, right? We're not calling it quits, in other words. But I was thinking every 2 weeks might be something that is a couple things. We will do the show every 2 weeks as we've been doing it for the last 7 years. Random Encounter's not going anywhere. Die Roll's not going anywhere. The thing is, I think that many RPGs, and you guys know, you guys are consumers. You tell me if I'm way wrong on this. But there seems to be like a peak for RPG podcasts. Maybe it's 3 to 4 years, maybe it's 5 years, but maybe it's the first year. I don't know. But somewhere there seems to be a peak in the RPG. Table flip. Podcasts, like, anybody that's going to start an RPG podcast, specifically commentary, you're going to rehash all the topics that every other RPG podcast has probably touched on in one shape or form. The unique, and I tell people, go create your own show if you want, because you can always have your own spin. There's people that are going to listen to you because of your outlook on the topic. They're going to listen because they like how you talk, the chemistry, a variety of number of things. And the same things that also play a part in why people won't want to listen to you. We have done 7 years. At the end of this year, we will hit 372 episodes that are out there. I'm going to try to put them all in one feed so that everybody can go back to number one and start there and move forward. Because right now you can't. We only have 300 in our feed currently. And the reason is if your feed gets too big, then you run into technical problems. And RSS feeds, they don't have a limit per se, but they do if you're working with podcatchers and other things. Also, a lot of you, not all, but there's a lot of people that are usually a week behind in an episode. So cranking them out, you're not getting it, oh, it dropped, I'm going to listen to it, right? There's a few, and they're the ones that are probably be disappointed in the release schedule, but we're not going bye-bye. It could, I doubt it, but it could up our game a little bit. Like we could do a little bit more prep because we have more time. So we could still use that off day to still prep for the topic that's coming up in a week. Right now, we probably don't do that. Shocker. You probably know that. We're not ones that do a ton of research, bring up a lot of quotes, pulled up things out of the Dungeon Master's Guide of 5th edition where it says, look, you can do this right here. But why don't we do that? We could do something else for the show. We could, if Brett says, hey, I want to interview people, Brett or Sean says, hey, I want to interview people in the hobby. When could I do that? Could we do it as part of the show? I don't know, maybe I want to do this piece. And I'd say, okay, great. I'll produce it. You're not technical on that regard. So let me know what your thoughts are. And we could just keep the same time slot. We'll just put out something different for that time slot. Yada, 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 right? So there's a lot of different things that kind of like, well, why not? We kind of, in Brett and my eyes, sometimes we kind of say, well, we kind of earn the ability to do that, right? Our catalog is, deep. It might not be great, but it's there. It's not like we just started 2 years ago. We've got, just over 100 episodes, and now we're considering this, right? That's another thing, Roger, the Delta Green piece. I still have all the audio for that. I haven't put it out yet. That's on the to-do list. So it might free me up to be able to produce that and put it out in an audio show. I can say this. If specifically to Roger in his Delta Green Redux, the Delta Green experiment it's a failed experiment. I do not anticipate Brett taking the Mondays off to run a game for BSers. He could change his mind, but I don't see that happening. So I think that's like, if we were like, hey, we should try to, run this parallel game and do a comparison thing, I think that idea is shit can, as far as I'm concerned. For the time being. So, I have my own thinking of how this will play out. I think we'll just get a day off, a couple days off a month. However, I bring this up, one, because you're all fans of the show or you wouldn't be here on the How to RPG stream, but but if our show usually was like 2 hours, could Sean run another game during those every other week off nights? And I thought to myself, one thing that I don't hear a lot about in a lot of the RPG podcasts that I've listened to, although I'm sure they're out there, is the 1 hour game or the 1 hour session. That was my long transition to this topic. There you go. What do you expect? Come on. You guys know me, right? Michael, Merry Christmas. Yeah, man. Anything going on. I don't have kids. We celebrated it a little bit, yesterday. Probably go to my dad's, but yeah, we don't have a big family where it's a big ordeal. So I figured, it's a Saturday, I'll get on. I'm surprised that all you guys turned out, honestly. I thought I'd be, talking to myself. So thanks for showing up. Appreciate it. Victor says, but then I was listening to 30 hours a week for 7-ish years. I stopped listening because they pod fade. Yeah. I do like the idea of interviewing people, maybe consider particular people in the community, especially people who specialize in particular RPGs. Yeah, I think if I did an interview, if you want to listen to interviews, go listen to Craig Shipman's Third Floor Wars podcast. He does a good interview. I don't want to rehash stuff that Craig's rehashing. I don't want to rehash stuff that other people that have interviewed industry people have rehashed. And I don't think Craig's doing that. I think he's doing it in a particular way. He's good at interviewing people. I find it interesting where I think if somebody else interviewed the same people, it might not be interesting. And that might be me or Brett. I don't like how we interview people. I don't like how we've ever interviewed anybody on the show, honestly. That is why with some of the people that we've had on the show, we're like Christian and Ron Blessing, we talked about Savage Worlds. They kind of came on as subject matter experts to tell us about Savage Worlds. We didn't interview them. Same with Aloy Lasanta to some degree. We, talked about the PIP system. That's where I think would be a decent angle is like, hey, Monty Cook Games, great. I don't want to talk about Monty and his days in the 3rd edition and his career starting out in Ire Crown Enterprises and and his work on 3rd edition and some of the things that were conundrums and how he, I would want him on to talk about Invisible Sun. Like, I don't understand anything about Invisible Sun. What's that all about? Something along those lines. Having said that, it's not one of the things that I really wanted to contemplate, but I could throw it in there. you know, it would have to be in a particular approach. Like, you're like, okay, game designer, you're going to run your one shot at a con. Tell me how you would do that. How is that pulled off? Because you're the person that is behind the game. You know, your interpretation of Invisible Sun is going to be different than anybody else's. So I don't know. And interviews are weird because people pick and choose on what they listen to for interviews. Craig's interviewing, Dennis Detwiller. Ooh, I know Dennis is a handful. I'm going to listen to that one. He has opinions. And then he, interviewed somebody else. And I'm like, who's that? Why? Whoa, I don't know if I don't know how that would be interesting. But I'll say he'll interview somebody. I'll be like, I don't know. And then I listen to it and I'm like, oh, okay, that was a good interview. I liked it because the person wasn't a superstar in the industry, but still had a particular angle that I was more educated on and enlightened about. Anyways, regardless, why am I getting on this topic? Who knows? Anyways, you could do parallel games with other BSers. I mean, seeing how you or Harrigan, Wayne, Kevin runs a game, for example, could be interesting if they were up for it. That's an idea for sure. I know, kids, I knew you was going to be on from last week. That is why I'm on. Roger says +1. Phil said. Michael says, I enjoy the long-running shows, but I've also developed an appreciation for the shows that start out with a goal in mind, cover subject X, and then done. So here's another thing, too, I'm concerned with, and it's been in place for a long, long time, and I don't know how many people we've ever lost for it, is we start out the show in a very soft manner, I guess. Would it be called soft? I'm not a fan of our beginning of our episodes. I don't think I've ever expressed that to Brett. So this might be, touching on some sensitive ground. I don't. Many best practices in podcasting is you introduce the show, you get to the topic, and that's it. You get going, right? That's what you're tuning in for. Let's get to the main topic. What are we talking about? We've got random encounter, and I think people find that as a value. Like, a lot of people like probably random encounter than what we babble about with the main topic. I'm not debating that. The hey, how you doing? Good. What'd you do this week? Great. But this stems, there was a time when you'd ask Brett what he was doing, and he'd go off on like, I went hunting and saw this deer, and then my weapon, and I'm like, great, but it's not even gaming related. Like, dude, I'm talking about what did you do in gaming? And Brett came around to the gaming piece, but I don't even know if that's, yeah, okay, Sean's playing Forbidden Lands. Oh, they had a, kooky encounter. Okay, great, maybe. Some of you might appreciate that because you might have a connection with us. You know us, how some of you are in that game. But I was going to put out a poll, and it was going to be, hey, do you like the first 10 minutes of the show? Period. Like, right up until random encounter. Do you like any of that? Because what Brett doesn't know, he might know now, but what Brett doesn't know is we could still do it for the live show. And then when I put it out for audio, just axe it. Chunk, And some people like the personal piece. I think there's a lot of podcasters that are also told, don't be afraid to be personal and put yourself out there and be vulnerable and tell people what about yourself and some of the things that are happening in your life. Which is great. That's how you kind of garner a connection. But here's the deal. You don't have to do it every episode, and it doesn't have to be like a 10-minute conversation. Like, hey, Mirko, for what it's worth, I like the gaming chatter at the beginning of the show before you get into the main topic. Great. Mirko likes it. Check. Great. Good to know. Some might not. If you have an opinion, I don't have a poll up, but if you have an opinion, you want to write me, DM me on Discord, email me at Sean@GamingBS. or Sean at How to RPG, that's fine. I'd be interested to know. Yeah, I would, the Patreon version, I could include it or exclude it, right? I could put up two different versions of the show. One of the thing about Patreon is, I would always do my damnedest to make that like an ad-free version. So if we ever were to get advertisers, which right now is not in the cards, but it could be, because I could get freed up to do that. If you're a patron, one of the levels would be, you're not going to hear any ads. Oh, fantastic. Great. Like, because that's what these models are about. Hey, you want Hulu for $6 a month? You're going to get ads. You want to pay the premium? No ads? Okay. YouTube, same thing. Same with the random encounter. Move it to after the main topic. Maybe. I don't know. Does it change up the show enough? Does it do something for the show? I don't know. So having said that, let's bring it back around to why I brought this up is because if I have that free night, I don't think I'm going to have enough time to run a 3 to 4 hour session. See you, Phil. Have a good one. I don't think I'm going to have enough time to run a 3 to 4 hour game session. Could I do an hour? The biggest issue was I would only be able to run 1 hour for 1 week, for 2 weeks. That's like a half-hour RPG a week. That is brief. So I thought, I don't hear a lot of conversation about the 1 hour session. There might be, hey, do you run the lunch hour? Do you run, a lunch game? And how do you do that? So it's specifically around the lunch hour, which, let's face it, a lot of the details that go into that are going to be with what I'm talking about here, which is the 1 hour game session. Another thing I'd also propose, which I don't plan on pulling off anytime soon, is, and it kind of ties into the lunch hour game, is could you run one game 1 hour every day, like Monday through Friday, or Sunday through Thursday, or whatever that is. And if you were to do that, how would you do it? How would it differ from a game that you're doing a 3 to 4 hour session once a week? Would it appeal to you? How would you prep for it? What would you need to lay down as far as expectations goes when you're talking to your players, right? Because the one thing you can't have is a lot of banter, pregame banter, which is sometimes fun. Like almost every game group I've ever played with for any significant amount of time, there's always the pregame banter, which I think is great. I haven't seen the people for a while, catch up, talk about what's going on, bullshit a little while, and then game. That's like out the window when you're doing like 1 hour. Like, dudes, we're going to start at like noon, or 7 o'clock p.m. We're going to go to 8 p.m. We're done. As if we were recording an episode of Gaming and BS. And even Brett and I take 2 hours to do that. But most of the times I got folks like, somebody upstairs that says, no, I'm not talking about the Lord. My significant other that's like, hey, do you think you could kind of wrap things up a little sooner tonight? It'd be nice, have you up here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's weird. My wife loves me. So even the show, when I come and record with Brett, I'm usually down here at like 7:30 Central Time. Fire everything up. Brett might be on, or he'll come on a little bit later. Comes on probably 7:45. Everything's working. Audio's fine. Launch the show, do the show, get done with the show, and then talk. Because Brett and I don't do a lot of talking to each other outside of the show as much anymore. We don't work together. Before the pandemic, maybe we go to lunch every once in a while. But, his and my interactions are usually now more limited to the show than any time, that once a week. And now it's going to go to every 2. But we can message each other and all this other stuff regardless. Yeah. So Ty mentioned, Sean, with your 1 hour, would you use a pre-gen? That's a good question. So this is not so much a, hey, I'm going to talk about the 1 hour RPG and have all the answers in this stream. But it's something I want to bring out, put it out there so you guys can kind of talk about it in the chat, bring it up and say, yeah, this is what I would do. This is probably what I wouldn't do. Oh, and you should probably consider this. I probably want to do an episode on how to RPG on the 1 hour game session, because I think there is a lot that can be talked about, honed in to ensure it can be as successful as it can be. So when you talk about pre-gens, do you do pre-gens? Do you not do pre-gens? How important is the group outside of that hour, and how do you facilitate that? Do you facilitate any of it? Right? So people have weighed in on our Discord. I put it out on Twitter. And I think on Twitter, I just said, hey, has anybody ever run a 1 hour session RPG over time? Now, I'm not talking about like a 1 hour intro session done, which I think Phil did at a con. And there's been some good advice. I haven't consolidated it all, but some of the things that have like running through my brain, how does it compare to a 3 to 4 hour, like even whittling it down to say, hey, I'm going to run a 1 hour session. Maybe it's not even 1 hour a week. Maybe it's just we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 hour each. Okay. Which is 3 hours a week. How does that compare with the one sit down 3 hour session? Because there's going to be like breaking points that's going to need to be considered, like the whole kind of dynamic. Other than, hey, we sit down and we play. When we play, a lot of the prep, how you, like what you're going to present to the players, how you end the session, how you begin the session, all that's going to change dramatically. What you present to them in the session. What expectations do you have outside of that session? What does that all look like? So, time to set up, what time of the day does that matter? Noon, like the lunch hour piece. One of the things I had thought of, which may or may not have come up, is, pre-rolls. You pre-roll, you have a pre-roll sheet. I give you a form, you go like, this would be interesting because I think it would put so much more load on the players than they're probably used to, even in 8-hour marathon sessions. Here's the deal. We're going to play 1 hour, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. This is how it's going to go. Here's the format. We're going to sit down, and when the clock strikes top of the hour, it's go time. You guys want to chitter chatter? Show up early. But 8 p.m., noon, whatever, clock strikes, whatever hour, we're playing. You guys got to shut up. I don't mean to be rude, but you got to shut up and we're going to play. Finish the conversation afterwards, whatever. Show up with a sheet of pre-rolled results. So if you're playing probably like a D20 based game like D&D 5th edition, have a sheet with a shit ton of D20 rolls. Feng Shui does that. You can actually go out there, get a sheet of just numbers, random numbers. And as you're using minions, you're crossing them off. So like, oh, it's this minion's turn. You don't even roll. You just look at the sheet. They got a 10. That's a fail. Did 10 hit you? No. Cross it off. Next. Like, you could do fixed damage, right? No rolling damage. It's always fixed. So D&D has that, 5th edition, right? You can either roll or you can take the, what is it? I think it uses the average or the mean. I don't know what it is. But hey, you roll with an axe. An axe always does 4 points, 5 points, whatever. Facilitating some of the things outside of the session, right? You almost gonna have to, because if you get into, hey, we got a schedule, or hey, I'm gonna be out. I just wanted to bring it up, to everybody. I probably won't be like, we've had some people like, hey, I can't show up. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show up on the 23rd session for December because of the holidays. Okay, well, when will you know? I don't know. Well, that was talked about in Discord, but it was also talked about, online. I think we even, at the end of the last session, we were like, okay, when's the next one? January 6th. Okay, it's not during a holiday season. Is everybody good? Nobody's traveling? Yep, we're all good. Okay, great. Just want to double check. Like, that's got to go. Like, you don't want to talk about that stuff. You want to be like, okay, last we left off was this. And even that might be like too much. Last we left off, you've got to remember. Or somebody like in our group in Forbidden Lands, Kevin, he's like the big chronicler. So he, at the end of the session, copies, pastes his notes in our Discord. This is what happened. So you could have forums, Discord for I would say outside talk, what that looks like. You got to emphasize the importance of showing up on time. What happens if somebody's not going to be there? Sometimes with the hour sessions, something last minute could come up. It could happen with any game, but is there a priority with the players that still resonates with them for an hour? If a player missed 2 sessions, but they were only an hour apiece, is that different than if you had a player like, hey, Sean, I can't play in the Forbidden Lands game. That one off week, that one, that's 3 hours. Then you got to bring them up to speed. Is that a big deal? Like, things come up all the time, right? But in a 1 hour session, does that impact the game more or less? If it impacts it more, do you have to kick them to the curb quicker, faster, fill the gap? How much is party balance involved in a 1 hour session game? Combat. Holy shit, you take one combat, in some systems, it eats up at least 2 hours. How do you roll through that 1 hour? Maybe it's not a combat-based game. And that's a decision that I think the game master and the players have to come to terms with. And you got to kind of outline what that looks like. So here's the deal. We're going to do 1 hour. If we do 1 hour, I got to tell you, the combat's got to be much less less in consuming time, or it's got to be, and that could be either not running as many combat encounters, or if there is a combat encounter, we got to get through it like this. So how does that impact what system you pick? And does it? I mean, Savage Worlds, Fast, Furious, Fun. Some might say combat in Savage Worlds, maybe getting through, like, okay, your turn. Flipping cards, you already know the initiative, right? They're all in front of you. Everybody knows when they're going to be going. Everybody should know what spell they're going to cast. And they're either, Savage Worlds has up, down, or off the table, right? Kind of statuses of each, minions, they get hit, they're done, they're gone. If they're a wild card, well, they can take some more damage and be stunned and all that other stuff. So, but do you change? You go, well, it can't be D&D because it's too slow. It can't be Pathfinder because I'll never get through it. Well, you can find ways to do it, but does that impact your decision to choose a particular game or system? Excuse me, you could play Pathfinder and never run combat if that's an option, if you want to do that. But your player's got to be on board with that, right? If your player's coming to the table and they're like, hey man, I got the tank. When does When does shit hit the fan? Like, I'm ready. Let's go. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Combat's a last resort. And if you pick combat as a last resort, how do you enforce that? Do you say, you crank up the lethality rating of your game? Or do you try to prevent a lot of hostile interactions? There's a lot of these questions when you're shrinking down that time and you're like, but here's the thing. How much of this discussion goes to our normal traditional game sessions, right? Our normal traditional campaigns. Like, some of the things that we need to really enforce and really nail down in a 1 hour session that you're going to do over time. Maybe you take some of those practices and put it towards, the Forbidden Lands game that you're running every 2 weeks for 3 to 4 sessions online. So there's a lot of little things that are kind of going through my brain. And in order to do a video on this, on how to RPG, I haven't done it, right? One of the things that probably makes sense. I always, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks. We've been one for 7 years. And you could speculate and all this, but, if I did an episode on Forbidden Lands on like, hey, here are some things that you should do when you run Forbidden Lands, because it'll probably help your game be better overall for you and the players, is probably, if I came from a place of, this is why I'm doing this video, is because I made the mistakes of not doing them, and I want to provide that to you so you don't make the same mistakes. So in short, I haven't played a 1 hour session over time. So it's kind of like, if I do the video, it's definitely going to be, here's what I think is going to help. And some of them are going to be real no-brainers. But it's also maybe not here is step-by-step how you will run a 1 hour session, a 1 hour per session campaign over time. I'm not talking about one-shots. I'm not talking about D&D encounters. I know they tried that. They did that. And some of that may be something to model it after. I didn't play a lot of the D&D encounters, which they do have. I think they're still continuing to do that to some degree, specifically in AL or even at con games. Like, oh, you're new to D&D. You've never done that. Go over here. Somebody will run you through like your character sheet, and then they'll run you through an encounter. Then you roll some dice, and then boom, you're done. And it's an hour, and then you get a taste of D&D 5e, and now you go into the Adventurers League and go bonkers on some longer, deeper stuff. So going back to Ty, Sean, with your 1 hour, would you use pre-gens? I would not, because, well, correction. Ty, I would if it was like in a 1 hour game over 3 sessions. That would be essentially a one-shot, I think. I wouldn't do that. And the reason I wouldn't do that in the same situation is because the players probably want to play what they want to play. But they'd have to create, like, session 0 is an hour. Session 1 might be, session hour 0, just because it's, here's another thing. If you did session 0 and you only got through half of it in the first hour, you might have to take, session 0 part 2 and do the second hour in the next one. But the point of this whole thing is it's your meeting for 1 hour to play an RPG. Ideally over an extended amount of time. Okay, whether that's a month, a week, per day, whatever. But if the thing with pre-gens is, the players want to play players want to have some investment, and I think that's like the immediate way to get them invested into a game is they create their own character. Like, you take that away from them. Not that they can't, like, for conventions, it's for convenience, right? And time as well. So that's what Ty's probably getting into, right? If you go to a convention, you're going to play, you're going to have pre-gens, you're not going to have players eat up 2 hours of character generation and then run them through a 2-hour game. You want to get them into the action as fast as possible. So I do see what you're probably getting at, Ty, but I would want them to create their own characters ahead of time, much like any other game. You do a 3-hour session with an intermission, or you could break it for 2 episodes. Yeah. And keep in mind, like, this thing that I'm talking about doesn't have to do with streaming. It doesn't have to do, could be nice, right? Because you tune into an AP, man, it's like 4 hours or 3 hours. Ooh. But the breakpoints are really not there, right? It's like one solid 3 hours of gaming. I think there is a little bit of a market for an actual play that's like an hour every episode. To me, sometimes I think YouTube is I think sometimes on YouTube specifically, people are stuck in their own YouTube bubble. You could create your own TV show on YouTube, period. People have done it and have been successful. Letterkenny, I think, is where it started. Letterkenny, the series, started on YouTube. You can create your own freaking TV show on YouTube. There's nobody stopping you. And it could be as long as you want. You're not restricted by FCC and networks. Like, that's why I'm thinking, like, what's a normal YouTube video? Well, it's 15 minutes, algorithm. You want to get to this. It's usually a lot of how-to. But, you know, part of why Brett and I stream our live recording is, one, we're going to record it anyways. We are going to see each other, preferably, when we do it. Why not put it out there? So it's like an hour kind of TV show. But for YouTube, it's going against the YouTube grain, because people get on YouTube and they just want to get through a 5 to 15 minute video to get to the point, and then they're done. Well, what about the people that like the long form, tuning into David Letterman only on YouTube or whatever? Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. Quincy says, when prepping games, I plan on about a quarter of the session being non-game related, but I do mostly 2 or 3 hour sessions. Yeah. And how would this change? Right? If you say, well, I do about a quarter of the session being non-gaming related, and you do, say, a 2 hour, so 30 minutes non-game related. Not a bad ratio. You do 1 hour, so 15 minutes, then you're looking at 45 for the rest of the game. Yeah. I mean, certainly doable. My group does a arena battle using ICRPG, Ty says. No need to set up, and easy to make the PCs pre-game. We use for all arena games. Yeah, my normal online games are about 2+ hours, maybe up to 3, or continue the next session. Victor says, I've heard a few lunch hour games with coworkers. Right. I mean, here's the thing with lunchtime games with coworkers, is you probably don't want to talk about the rest of the bullshit that you typically talk about or have to deal with during the day or whatever. Right? It breaks up that day. So the last thing they're going to do is come to that D&D or game RPG session and want to talk about their day. Whereas at the end of the day, and you got to go meet with the Forbidden Land group, hey, how you doing? Oh man, I'm just having a bad day at work. Oh, sorry to hear that, man. What's going on? Blah. Right? Because they don't know. I don't want to talk that with my other partners in crime at work. Ty says, or do you wrap up when the 1 hour mark comes up? Jim says, talked about it on Discord already, but we've been doing 1.5 to 2 hour sessions recently, which has been nice. Why has it been nice, Jim? Tell me why. Ty, 4 times game. Why does it do that? 4 times game speed. Yeah. Victor says, isn't that a feng shui thing with the sheet of rolls? Yep. It was. Good call, man. Wow. All my rolls are 20s. How did that happen? I know. I got your number, Ty. Like the fixed damage gets you back into the game faster. I mean, you could do that. You could have all your damage written down, but I think it's got to be a single number. Just use the damage, fixed number. If you're going to use the same freaking axe and the same freaking sword every time, it's the same number every time. Period. End of discussion. Put your damage in there. Your strength mod and your, whatever, weapon damage. That's your damage all the time. As a matter of fact, if you're doing that as a game master, you're going to probably find out whose damage is the same every time. Oh, you hit. Great. -4. That was Victor, -4. All right. Ty, you hit? Okay. Ty hits for 3. You don't even have to name the damage over time because the DM's just going to know. Oh, hey, Sean, how much did you mark me down for damage? 3? Oh, no, man. That's changed. Oh, I did not know. Why? Remember, I got that new weapon. Ah, my bad. Okay. Victor says, I'm an hour session. Last we left off would be really short. Do might not hurt much. Oh, Victor, kill me in there. If the game session is next day game, I think no recap could work for me. Yeah, we recap because time's gone by and people have forgotten things, right? This is Sean's brain. It only holds this amount. Anything more and it just comes out pouring out. So the recap, so we play, fills up Sean. And then work days come by and other things come by, family comes by, and then just pours more stuff into it. And then all of Sean's game stuff kind of bubbles over. So the recap puts it back in there. That's my analogy of filling the Sean brain glass. So yeah, if you're doing it every day, what do you need to recap? Last we left off 24 hours ago. Quincy says an hour session campaign feels like it would have to follow a Bazooka Joe comic formula. Right. Yes. Valid. Sure. Like you almost have to even just, cutscene. Boom. You're in cutscene. Boom. Hey, where are you going to go? Cutscene. Boom. Like there's no travel there. You're just there. Why? I don't know. You ended up there. You're boom. You're in the bad guy's warehouse. Yes, there has to be some, thought to the madness, but recapping a 1 hour session is really fast though. Should only take a couple of minutes. True. That's a good point. Quincy says resolve, action, cliffhanger. Ty says I see RPG can be a very fast tempo game. Jim says not having players roll dice or consider mechanics speeds up a ton. It's not for everybody. For sure. Just like any game. But obviously with a bigger emphasis, right, on this one because of the format. Michael says my favorite AP podcasts are the ones that split the AP into 1 hour segments, roll for combat, for example. Cool. Yeah. Good point. Marco, those are the only APs I listen to. There's a really good Hot Springs Island AP podcast with 45-minute episodes. I'd like to know what that is, Marco, please. If you could think about it, let me know. Jim, topping out at 2 hours per session is nice because that's about the maximum amount of time people can stay totally focused on the game without needing breaks or attention wandering. Yes. I think that's the thing too. Like with our Forbidden Lands game, we get on around 7:30ish, shoot the shit for at least a half hour. Sometimes we got a little longer. And then we game. But we game up until, that's 8, maybe 8 o'clock. Say 8, conservatively speaking. And then we go to like 10, 10:30. So our Forbidden Lands games aren't long. But we start so late, and we have a couple folks on the East Coast. Shit feels like, God, is he one past? I think he might be like 2 hours difference from Central Zone. Like is he in Nova Scotia? I don't remember. And he left. But I think when those guys get 10 o'clock my time, you're talking like midnight. Now you got to go to work the next day. Victor says, Jason Cordova had a 15-minute Dungeon World podcast going at 1.1 GM, one player, 15-minute sessions. And I remember that, and I can't remember what it was. And I think it was with Rich, wasn't it? And I remember them. I don't know if I've ever listened to it, but I remember them talking about it on one of their shows. Probably was Plus One Forward, I'm guessing. Check it out for how they kept it on target. Yeah. Shit. Could you do a 15-minute session? Why has it got to be an hour? I don't know. That might be too short. Too crazy. I'm going off the deep end, man. I'm too crazy. That's just nuts. It's just nuts. That's crazy talk, Sean. Have you lost your damn mind? The 1 hour session. We're all bitching about time. We don't have time. How many games could you run 1 hour sessions? All right, Jim. Thanks, buddy. Have a good one. Merry Christmas. Not remember the rich, but I can remember the player's name. Victor says, what would you use? How would you set it up? Like, you'd have to have a channel offline. So the thing is with this is when I talk about a 1 hour session, because people will be like, well, is it really 1 hour if you're like talking offline and all this other dialogue offline? I'm literally talking offline when it comes to downtime. You know, like any other role-playing game campaign, if you're wanting to do things offline outside of in-game session, like maybe it's asking questions that came up or XP. Like I would totally do XP offline. Or you just fix it. Fix XP. You play a session, you get XP. This is what the amount is. Period. End of discussion. Like doesn't even matter what you do. This isn't based on gold or killing monsters. You play in a session, you get XP. So every 4 sessions, you're in a level. For 5, whatever. I mean, can you imagine every 4 sessions leveling? Holy shit. That's like, every 4 sessions leveling? That's crazy. Because if you're doing that in a typical D&D 5e game, shit, you could level twice in one 8-hour marathon Saturday. It wouldn't take you long to get the 10th. Discern realities. Ah, yes. I remember that now. Thanks, Victor. Discern realities. If you want to check out how Jason Cordova and the folks over at the Gauntlet had handled that. I'm sure it's still out there. I haven't listened to it, but I know the title for sure. Todd says, hey, Todd, I think having the Discord thread for offline is helpful. For sure. You got to Facebook, group message, group text, whatever it is, you gotta have something to be able to manage that, the BS that's outside of that session. Maybe it's a rules clarification. There's another one. Talk about futzing around with the rules. I mean, we get hung up with like a 3 to 4 hour session and somebody's got to make a rules calling and you got to look it up in 2 or 3 books. Most game masters will say, hey, here's the deal. Because of, the flow of the game, I'm going to make a ruling and we can look it up later. Shit, in a 1 hour session, you got to be like either system mastery or you just got to roll. Like, hey, here's the deal. And most of this stuff has to do with like, what are the expectations with your players? And what do the players expect from you as a game master? Like, it's a whole different level, I think. Completely different level. And you're right. Jim mentioned it earlier. It's not for everybody. People are going to be like, dude, no, I'm not. This is not for me. Like, it's maybe taking too much agency away from me or whatever. Or the game master's like, these guys aren't doing anything on the off time. They're like not leveling their own tune because they're like, they play for an hour. They don't look at the Discord. Every 4 sessions leveling is a great idea for Wes March's style game. That's another thing, so say not only is it the game that you choose, like I think role-playing game X would fit this better than role-playing game Y. But then what does the sessions look like? Like, is it intrigue, heavy role play, no combat? Or is it West Marches? Like, hey, West Marches game for an hour session, like, hey, players, you got to come to the table. You got to tell me ahead of the time what you want to do. Another thing is, what is the time between sessions? Because you're playing every day for an hour, there's like some people get so, if you do the lunchtime game, you're working, playing the lunchtime game, go back to work, got to pick up your kids, got to make dinner, something else that night, you got an obligation, could be another game. I mean, then the next time, repeat. Maybe the players are going to have no time. If you do a 1 hour session every day, maybe there is no break to do that thing, right? Brett and I talking about this, right? We're taking a break from doing it every week. Why? Because we might be able to do other things or concentrate more on something. Imagine doing it every day. Mirko, good to see you, man. Merry Christmas. Happy, I will talk to you guys by Happy New Year, right? Yeah. Victor says, downtime prep does not count against the 1 hour limit. It's homework for the next session. Yep, true, yes. They got to do it, though. Like, there's probably going to be stuff that you're going to be like, here's the deal. I'm going to put this in the Discord. I'm going to need answers. And then you're not going to want answers before, like, hey, we start at noon. What are those answers to those questions? Oh, yeah, here they are. Like, you as a game master might want those 12 hours ahead of time to be able to prep something. How do you prep? Ty says, we do our arena battle style of game. Could be awesome. 1 hour game, no drama, no need for other stuff, just fight. How long does a fight take? How many people are involved in that fight? What system are you using for that fight? How are you running the fight? And yeah, you could have that at a con. There's actually a con game that they do. Ernie Gygax does it, I think. They did, where it was like, I can't remember what the premise was. Was it a mountain? That's what it was. Like, you could drop, it was literally drop in, drop out. 50 or 100 pre-gens. You pick one, you join, and whoever's at the table plays. And they go into their character's dead, and they just, I move, your turn, okay. Smash, you're dead. Okay, bye, see you later. Like, and they do that for a whole con. Can't remember what the event is. Todd says, I have run play-by-post on Discord and run just combats in live sessions online. Interesting. The combat we could wrap in less than 2 hours most of the time. That's another thing, is play-by-post. We don't have it on the schedule. I don't know why, because somebody suggested it. And I know Harrigan was a big play-by-post guy, and he still kind of is. And he's like, hey, I'm more than happy to provide some insight into that. And it's another form that I want to explore. And I don't know if that's like on Gaming EBS or myself here. Play-by-post. How do you do a play-by-post? What's cool about it? What's not cool? What do you need to learn about it? So those are some of the things. Like, we could talk about ad nauseum about some of the things in the hobby. But there's experiences that some people have no idea exist out there. Play-by-post. What? Play-by-post. How does that work? Why would I like that? And maybe you don't, but at least you know about it. Ty says, uses ICRPG with fixed damage. Got it. Victor White says DCC does that. If you roll, all you roll is 1d20, and that is all you need to do. Still got to add it, right? Or, roll it. What if you don't roll it? Do you have dice that fall off the table? Maybe, are you playing face-to-face or online? Michael, sounds like Tracy Hickman's Killer Breakfast, which is a blast. Play until your character dies, jump on, and someone takes your seat. Characters just filter through. Yeah, I remember Tracy's. I haven't participated in that. I didn't know actually what the format was. I just knew it was like a big room of people having breakfast. Tracy. But there was some other, like, it wasn't Tower of Avernus. It's something. I can't remember. Ty says, I want to learn how to play by post. There you go. Good, Ty. Appreciate it. What do you want to know about it? Let me know. Make some talking points so we could address Ty specifically. This one goes out to Ty. The 1 hour session. I don't know if I can pull it off. Monday, like I think if you do 1 hour like every 2 weeks, it's just not gonna be like it's almost a waste of time. What? I can't believe he said playing RPGs might be a waste of time in any form. But it is. You gotta have, I work for a company where we do custom development and we do some digital marketing. Well, if you have a client that invests like a minimum amount of money into a search optimization program, it might not move the needle. It's not worth it. So they're just throwing money away. You have to have a kind of level of investment. And that's the same thing with this, right? 1 hour. Plus and that's another thing too, like many people could probably block off. How would if I told oh, hey, Tam, I'm going to go downstairs. It's my 1 hour game. Okay, have fun. And it's only going to take an hour. Can you imagine, like, hey, I'm like running errands, but I got to run my game. I'm going to do it while I'm running errands. All right, I'm back in my car. All right, this guy hacks, blah, 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 hits, let me sheet. Okay, nope. Do 7 damage. Victor says DCC does the drop in, drop out game over a con. Yeah, there was something else though, I think. They do drop in, drop out. They do a lot of the tournaments for sure. Michael says, I'd be worried about burnout for the 1 hour session. Even though it is shorter, that means prep every day. Yeah, I guess. Sure. I could see that. Like, might be prepping for an hour game. What'd you prep? I mean, I would say it is a game where the game master has to be like Brett. I'll give Brett credit there. That guy just wings everything. Like I don't even know if he writes down bullets and goes off of them. He's just like, okay, I'm going to have this guy walk in. My guess is he reuses just a lot of his own tropes, like things. And so he's going to run 2 games of Streets of Avalon, 1 in 5th edition and 1 in AD&D, using Osric for BSRCon. I'd be interested to watch. Well, he ran it for the Misdirected Mark crew, right? The Wednesday night All-Stars or whatever night of the week it was, All-Stars audio. It would be interesting we have one live play of Brett's on the Gaming and BS YouTube channel. I'd be interested to watch. Like, I haven't been part of Brett's game group for 20 years, but it would be interesting to see if he has a routine, so to speak, when running his games. I'm sure he does to some degree, and I don't know what that is necessarily. But, he would be, I know if I brought it up, he'd be like, oh, 1 hour session? Yeah, sure, no problem. I could do that all day. Just do this, right? That, got an idea. Oh, and then this guy comes in, and that guy goes, and okay, that was probably combat. Depends what they want to do. Yeah, he'd have a couple things in his back pocket, but nothing. I don't know how much documentation he ever does when he does prep. Ty says, play by post question. How do you handle conversations if you're the one typing? How do you have one-sided conversation. When do they respond? Do you type a commit or question and wait until they respond? Yeah, it all depends. Good question. So Ty says, in arena prep, pull up some monsters and then fight in the arena using ICRPG. Sure. Yes, absolutely. Totally get it. Did it as kids. Hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. Do you have any adventure plan? No. We could do gladiator fights. I suppose we could do that. Sure. Okay. Should you do PvP? Well, but if like my character dies, he's not really dead, right? No, we'll just do it for fun. Oh, okay. All right. That's cool. But I can't do that over time. That would drive me nuts. You know, hey, week 2 at the gladiator pits. And the reason is I don't play RPGs for combat all the time. Like I play for the full, like all the experience. Nothing wrong with gladiatory fights, but I wouldn't be able to do that for long term. Got to have some plot, you know. Got to have some character development. Looks like this is that time for me. I'm out. Have a great day, everyone. I think I'm going to wrap it up too. We're about 3 hours in now. Thanks, Victor. Have a good Christmas. Gabe, I have to retool between sessions. Yeah. But you're also retooling for how long of session, right? If Gabe is running Conan 2D20 and even if it's 3 hours, that's different. Like 3 hours, you know, I have to say with the Forbidden Lands group, it is amazing. It is amazing what little may get accomplished in an actual game session. And I mean that by not being it's not a dig at all. But I'll go and say, all right, they're here. What could they possibly do? And I think that's what runs through our brain all the time when we do GM prep is like, what could they possibly do given what's on the table and what they know? Okay, great. So I have to be kind of prepared if they go this way, or that way. Maybe it's not as clear and they're just not going to go down path 3. Do I provide another path? Like I want them to go in this direction, so I'll dangle the carrot in front of their face. So I will do that by introducing this new non-player character. Or having an existing non-player character where they are, tell them X, Y, Z, whatever. So with a 1 hour, yeah, I'll post on the 1 hour session thing is on there. And I think Play by Post, Harrigan might have put something on there, Ty. I don't remember. But happy Christmas, Ty. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. So when I get into Forbidden Lands, I'm like, okay, they could do a couple things, and then they don't do any of them. They don't do any of them. They're like, stay at the outpost. They're going to train. Don't want it to be too boring, so you kind of have some type of interaction occur, whether it's the proprietors of the outpost or somebody that visits, or it's the person they met last week that's talking to them. Maybe they disappeared. Maybe they went out, got in trouble. Maybe they're stranded somewhere. Their foot caught in a trap. And then there's the big bads that are coming through the forest, and they're like, oh my God, they're going to find them and kill them. And then they don't do any of that. Yeah. But I think it's a different, how would it affect your retooling process, Gabe? If it was only 1 hour, because I don't know what people are getting, and frankly, here's the deal. In a 3 hour session, some of us may run games where like one of those 3 hours is only productive. Like if you took the whole 3 hour, boiled it all down, we could have done that in 1 hour. And that's not looking back and saying that's another knock. It's just more of an observation piece, like, Anyways, It's an interesting one. I thought was interesting. I'm like 1 hour session, and it just came to me when we decided to turn that up because I'm like, could I run a game on a Monday, and how long would I have that game? Because I can't spread myself too thin. But 1 hour every 2 weeks, no. 2 hours, maybe. I don't know. Could I do 1 hour 2 nights a week? Because then you start getting into this. See, when I was in the National Guard briefly, the Guard was enough of a nuisance because it wasn't like an extended amount of time and it was 1 weekend a month, but it was enough to kind of ruin your month or ruin your week because you'd go like 2-3 weeks, then you'd have to go in for 2 days and be like, it's just that weird interjection. It's kind of like Ron Swanson says, don't half-ass 2 things. Whole ass one thing. So sometimes I think if you did the 1 hour thing, people would be just, no, it's not enough. It would be too irritating. There's not enough commitment or obligation. Obligation, not the word, but not enough commitment, or, it's not deep. It gets, this deep, shallow. So I don't know. Something. I wanted to talk about that instead of like everything else about the hobby and industry like we had last week. So hope it was getting the wheels turning in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, if you found any value in this stream whatsoever, do me a favor, give me a like, please. And you know what? That could be your Christmas gift to me. Sean, what could we get you for Christmas if we wanted to? And I'd say, hey man, just push the like button and maybe subscribe. I would be like, whoa, that's a nice gift. So there you go. Nothing big. Don't go out of your way. Just, we're going to record Brett and I on Monday as scheduled. Whatever Monday's date is, I could probably show it to you or figure it out. What is it? What are you talking about, Sean? That's a good question. I should probably know that. That's not running multiple NPCs. That's dropped. Rival adventuring parties. Brett's got a couple other ones up here. I'm not really sure. One is Rough Draft. Not sure what that is. They have fleshed out. And the other one is Rules as a Map. Rules as a Map. I don't know. Go over here. This would be Rule Zero Land. I don't know. That guy. I have play-by-post there, building using Cortex, David and Goliath. Like, some of these have not been touched. Brett's like, where's play-by-post? There it is, play-by-post. It's not scheduled. There's no number to it, so we'll see. What is this guy? Who's this guy? I gotta nuke that guy from... Yeah. Monday night, 8 p.m. Central Time, Gaming NBS channel here on YouTube. Going to be talking about Rival Adventuring Party. Should be fun. So tune in live if you want. I don't think I have anything else. You can find me on the Gaming NBS Discord. Just go to gamingnbs.com/Discord. Great group of people over there running different games, lots of different game talk, casual talk. It's a quaint community. No, not a ton of game bashing. Opinions are opinions only. And people are good to express their opinions without being overly offensive. So it's a good place. I like it. Uh-oh. Our automatic cat feeder is feeding the cat. So I'll let you all go. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. I really, very unexpected. I thought there might be one or two of you. So thank you so much. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, whatever you celebrate during this time of year. Appreciate all of you. Here's to look into the future. But yeah, remember, be a positive force in the tabletop RPG hobby. Thanks. We'll talk to you later.